Okay, so my name's Phil, and we're going to do practical Perky exam tips. I've got, how long have I got?
1 hour.
I've got 1 hour starting now. Okay, so we're going to move quite quickly, if that's okay. Again, I think sometimes when it comes to secondary school students, they seem to be asleep for most of the time, and then just before the final year starts, I've got an exam to take, oh my goodness. And they seem to be more worried about the exam, you know, and even in tertiary education. Do you want me to write what I think, or should I write what you think? That's the thing, isn't it? We know that effective exam skills can give around about 10 to 15% on top of the test score. We also know that actually autonomous learning, there was a study a couple of years ago in America where they gave students Spanish lessons, and then once a semester they would test the students, but they would give them a test on a Tuesday, and then they would give them the answers to the test, and then they would leave the room and allow the students to discuss what errors and what mistakes and what strategies didn't work, and then they would give them a similar test on the Thursday, the next lesson. And of course, the scores the second time they took the similar test improved, that's obvious. But what was really interesting was over the course of an academic year, the systems that the students had realized for themselves made the exams 10% more effective for them. And that's without any teacher input. So sometimes we tend to forget that students are actually, if they're motivated, and they tend to be motivated when they're taking an exam, they're actually pretty good at finding out strategies that work for themselves. Know your enemy is the important thing. And we tend to know that there are areas with, and I'm going to be talking mainly about the Cambridge Main Suite examinations, but you know, tests are tests, and so they're all fairly similar in the type and shape that they are. So normally there's a grammar bit, which is the use of English. There's a writing bit, there's a speaking bit, there's a reading bit, and there's a listening bit. And if you ask students, what are you worried about most? Well, they tend to be really worried about the speaking because they feel that it's performance-based and it's depending on their mood and the moment and everything else. They also seem to worry a little bit about writing because, again, it's productive and, oh, do I have to produce stuff? They might worry about listening because they're dictated by the timing of the listening texts on the recorder. They don't seem to be that worried or less so about the reading. But actually, reading is generally one of the areas where they're pretty bad, because they don't realize that a reading test normally contains multiple texts, and the strategies for the texts are very different. One will test vocabulary, the other will test cohesion, and they just read the text. Way back when I was a novice teacher working in Brazil, we used to have trainings on a Friday, no lessons Friday afternoons, trainings Friday lunchtime with lots of wine and beer. And then occasionally we'd have a proficiency race where drunk English teachers would try and complete a mock proficiency test after guzzling loads of wine, and we're all sort of near-native teachers, and we'd fail. Well, we'd pass the exam, but we'd make lots of mistakes. And we say, these damn tests, they're trying to trick us up. And I think that's true at almost every level. So let's have a look. We're going to use some pages from Gold Experience as examples of the exam types, but it doesn't matter which book you use, you can apply all these to different areas. We're going to start with reading. And we're going to talk about multiple choice questions, we're going to talk about matching questions, we're going to talk about gapped texts. Each of these reading texts tests different skills. And teachers either do one of two things in my experience. They will either spend a whole lesson on completing a reading text and the exercises in the lesson. And in that case, especially if it's a 45-minute lesson, the weakest students at the end of the lesson, the only thing they've learned are the answers. They haven't really improved their strategies or their skills. And if you ask them, what was the point of that lesson? To test our reading. No, it wasn't really. It was to answer the questions. I always tend to feel it's important to work with less. So I don't often work with a whole text in class. I'll work with a little bit of the text in class. We'll do a few of the questions, but we'll dig deeper and analyze it, because my learning outcomes are that the students realize what's being tested. And that's really fundamentally important. So you know what a gap text looks like. Yeah? It's a text. There are multiple, not a gap text, a multiple choice, obviously. There are multiple choice questions. Generally, the multiple choice questions are linear. So, question 1 refers to paragraph 1, question 2 refers to paragraph 2, etc., etc. Occasionally, although it's very rare, the last question might be a general question about the whole text. But generally, you know where it is. And so you have, in this case, because it's a B2 examination, you have a question and 4 choices. Of course, one of them is the correct choice, and the other 3 are distractors. When I'm building exam skills, I will spend more time on the distractors than on the correct answer. I need the students to understand why the distractors are there, because it helps when it's in an exam situation and they have to make an educated guess, which ones can they remove. So if it comes down to a 50-50 chance, then it's better than a 25% chance. So if we have a look at the questions, and I hope you can read the text there. Can you just about make it out? Yep. Obviously it's called Champs. It's about a competition. I'll give you about 30 seconds. I want you to start by reading the text, not the question. Even though the question's at the front, you probably just started doing that already. Now, can you give you a couple more seconds? And then have a quick look at the question and the answers. One of the things that I feel is really important is that students utilize the text. So when I watch students doing a reading test, if they're not writing all over the question paper, then they're losing something. And sometimes students don't want to spoil their books because they want to sell their books to the students next year. But I think it's really important that maybe sometimes it's worth photocopying. You can photocopy in England 5% of a book, photocopying the text so they can actually learn to write on it. Can you see a correlation between the red and the green in the questions and the red and the green in the text? I'm sure you can. So it's similar words. Yeah? So if you look at it and it says athletic teams from around the world, I've highlighted athletes around anywhere else in the world. Yeah? Similar words. And of course, if you look at the similar words, sometimes if the words are too similar, then it's a red herring. What's the origin of the word or term red herring? Do you know? You know hunting dogs like bloodhounds and everything else, that they get a scent. One of the ways you can put a dog off the scent is to have another stronger scent to disguise the original scent. And smoked fish has a very pungent smell. So if you were a criminal trying to escape hunting dogs, you will cover your tracks with red herrings. That's the origin anyhow. Quite a nice little story. So if we have a look at this text, I'm going to sit down so I can read it in front of me here. We've got A, we've got B, we've got C, we've got D. Let's analyse A. Is A the correct answer? Well, it says, what does it say in the first paragraph about the competitors at Champs? So we're only talking about the competitors at Champs, not every athlete, just competitors. And it says, only athletes aged 10 to 19 may enter Champs, but this 5-day event is the biggest of athletics contests in Jamaica, and unlike anything else in the world, blah, 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 blah. Obviously, A, these are not members of athletics teams from around the world, because it's a national event in Jamaica, it's a contest in Jamaica, and it's athletes from Jamaica, so A is a distractor. What about B? Well, B comes right at the end, and it says, where is it? A lot of people see athletics as a way to build a better life for themselves and their friends, and they think that doing well in their sport can help their families. Well, build a better life is similar to help, isn't it? But it's not exactly like for like. So generally this is a clue that it's a correct answer. Let's just check the others. Some of them have won Olympic gold medals. Well, we talk about Usain Bolt and Elaine Thompson as Jamaican role models, but they didn't win the gold medals when they were competitors at Champ, which is in the question, so it's a red herring. And then if you have a look at D, they win a lot of international running races. Well, established athletes who go on to compete in international events do. They've Jamaican, they've dominated, but not competitors at Champs. So the correct answer is B. Now, let's see if we can use the same process. We've got a shorter paragraph here, so it should be quicker to read. Can you read the paragraph first? Then can you look at the questions, and can you decide, I'm more interested in why the distractors are distractors rather than the correct answer. So spend about a minute or so having a look at that. Okay, so is the correct answer A? No. Do we have similar words? We have schoolwork in the last sentence, don't we? Yeah, several hours of training on top of schoolwork every day is an exhausting routine. So we have the word schoolwork, but it's not discussed whether they have more or less. So it's we can't use that. B. Again, we have late at night, and we have a similar expression in the text, late in the evening. So some students would grasp at that because it's got similar text. Oh, late at night, late in the evening. And one of the obvious distractors is to negate or to change it. So in fact, it says the opposite. But careless students will fall for the trap. So here they can't stay out late, and they have to train late. It's the opposite, so it's a distractor, yeah? And it's a normal trick. Again, are advised to eat fewer calories, and of course you've got the word healthy, but high calorie, so again it's the opposite, and again it's a trick that students fall into. They have to work very hard. The only indication that that's the correct answer is exhausting routine, which isn't so easy to spot like schoolwork or late at night, late in the evening, but is the correct indicator. So I tend to spend more time with just one question, one paragraph. And then with the weaker students, we can work with that paragraph. If the stronger students in the class have got the answer right, they're very clear about why it's right, and they've identified the distractors, let them do the rest of the exercise while I help the weaker ones understand what's being tested. So I tend to spend my time on doing less. Now let's do a matching exercise. You know the type here. We've got multiple paragraphs, and then you have questions, or you have questions relating to the paragraphs. One of the things I will do, I won't spend all my time looking at each paragraph. I'll do less. So I'll have, let's say we've got 2 paragraphs. I might write some quotes, and the quotes are what a target reader might comment on. Yeah? Let's make it easier. So let's not deal with 2. Let's deal with 1 paragraph. We're talking about memory boxes. And if you look at the picture in the initial one, I can go into detail. It's where people put things that relate to them, that they want to remember. And so we have one person talking about one particular box. And I've written 6 quotes. And these are people referring to that first paragraph. So have a look at the paragraph. And then have a look at the quotes. And then have a look at the first sentence. This box is a paper box. Can you see one of the quotes that might refer to that first sentence? Which number? Number 6, yeah. So the reader has read that first sentence, says, this box is a paper box. Oh, it's very big and there's a tear on the lid. This must refer to the box. Can you now very quickly, maybe with a partner or maybe on your own, decide where the other 5 quotes are connected? To what part of the text are they referring to? Yeah, we've spent enough time on that, haven't we? Yeah. So hopefully you've got something similar to that. Being able, and again I said it yesterday in my session, I don't feel the strongest students need far less from me as a teacher than the weakest ones do. So the weakest ones need that help and support for strategies, especially when it comes to exams. Being able to decode a text and look at the reference in a text, look at the pronouns, look at the demonstratives and decide what they're referring to. Giving them a little bit of support like this can really help them. So obviously, if I'm spending more time with the weakest students, what are the strongest students doing? They're looking at the next paragraph and they're writing the quotes. They're writing there's a tear in the box. So they're being creative. They've got a far more demanding task, and I can check and see what they're doing, and that can help them as well. Or I might get them to actually expand the text, because sometimes with reading text there is a sentence that needs to be inserted. So I might give them that second paragraph, and then I might say to them, right, with this second paragraph, where could you insert these extra clauses? And again, I'll give you a little bit of time to have a look. And And probably you'd say that first clause would come right at the end of the text. Yeah? A small model of the Eiffel Tower, comma, which says made in Paris at the bottom. It's possible to talk about the CD as well. I don't know if Paris produces lots of CDs. CDs aren't produced much anyhow anymore. Yeah? Again, the weaker students would work with the clauses I give them. And the stronger students would create their own clauses. Grade the task, not the text. Yeah? Can we move on? Okay. So, again, when we have multiple texts, normally the third part of a reading text, again, when we talk about matching exercises, we're talking about coherence and cohesion, being able to refer to things. When we're talking about the same topic and 4 or 5 different texts referring to the topic, it's all about vocab, it's about lexis, it's about synonyms. So, again, rather than deal with all 4, I might just take one paragraph. And I'll look at this paragraph and I'll do just simple substitution. So I'll say, here's a paragraph, and here are some words that you could replace words in the text with. If you have a look, if you sort of scan the text very quickly, can you find a word which means not dead? You have to scan quickly. Alive, yes, it's the last word in the second sentence. Yeah. So again, I'm not going to give you long enough to do all of them, but in the next 30 seconds or less, how many words can you find in the original text? Again, you haven't got long, so you might decide to give up. I would understand that. Because it's not about doing the task, it's about understanding the task so you can get your students to do it. Yeah? The power of substitution shouldn't be underrated. Obviously, with weaker students, you give them less words, less texts, and with stronger students, you get them to create the synonyms or antonyms. And I think it's really important that when students are checking and recycling vocabulary, that they do this in English. And the reason they do it in English is because they're using synonyms and antonyms to describe the meaning of words. As you know, most dictionaries have a defining vocabulary of 2,000 words, that's certainly English language dictionaries, that they'll use those 2,000 words to describe and define all the words in the dictionary. Yeah? So I'm going to give you a little vocab test now. All right? It's a writing test, not a speaking test. Okay? If you're not prepared to write, still be quiet, but try and mentally remember. Is that okay? I'm going to imagine that I'm doing a little bit of vocab recycling with a classmate. So I've noted some words from the previous unit, and I'm asking my classmate to write down the words I'm thinking of, but I'm not going to use Polish to define those words, I'm going to use English to define them. All right? And you're going to give me a number between 10 and 30. What's the number? 10. 10? My goodness. I want you to speak I want you to count very slowly, Andre. 10. Yeah? And I'll be looking, and then when you finish 10, say stop. Okay, so can you do this very slowly? And then say stop. I'll tell you when to stop. When I start, I'll try and define these words in 10 seconds. Okay? All right, you ready? Okay, so number 1, it's not interesting. Number 2, not a nephew, but the female variety. Number 3, a part of a cooker where you put the cakes. Number 4, you don't buy, it's the opposite. Number 5, it's not first, it's number 6, not quickly, but the opposite. Number 7, I can't remember. Number 8 is something you wear to stop the dirt coming on. Number 9, you can listen to things, it happens naturally, but if you listen, you concentrate. If you're not concentrate, you can still. And the last one, it's not the start, it's the... How many did you get? You didn't say stop. You weren't.
You didn't say stop.
I did say, well, I was trying to give myself an advantage. You've got to be more authoritative, domineering. Okay, so you get the idea. What was that? Hen, yeah. When you can't read your own handwriting. It's trying to get Hugh? Did I really write Hugh? No. Okay, but you get the idea. Getting the students to recycle vocabulary using English is really useful for the reading texts where they have to find other ways or they have to look at other expressions. And obviously, when we're talking about more higher level examinations, we don't define individual words, we define phrases and phrasal verbs. Yeah? Because these are the things that are often tested in this area. Then my favorite type of reading text. You know, the type where you have missing sentences, missing paragraphs, they have to find which one goes which. Students hate this. Students often make mistakes with this. Do you start with the text or do you start with the answers? You always start with the answers. Yeah, you don't want to distract the students with the text. So you spend a lot more time with the answers. And the reason you spend time with the answers is because you really want them looking for referents. Referents are those pointing words, this dexis, if you like. And so if you have a look at these 4 unconnected sentences, and if I tell you that the text that these sentences came from different contexts, and if I said one of the contexts is sort of connected to relationships, you might be able to look at the first sentence and try and say, yeah, I can see that. That was a relationship that didn't last for certain reasons. And if I said that one of these might be connected to teaching, and it could be number 3, and if I ask if the teacher is male or female, you could probably tell me that the teacher, I mean, it's difficult to tell in this day and age, isn't it? Yeah?
Well, I need to lose weight, so it could be me.
Yeah, there you go.
Depends what them refers to.
Depends what them comes to. The kids that you're carrying in your womb, maybe, no. So when the teacher came in, the students got the exercise books out and started to correct the homework with him. So this is the type of narrative or story I get the students to try and create in pairs. Yeah, I get them to try and build on the basic words and make a story out of it. It was when his girlfriend saw him kiss the other girl that she finally decided to end their relationship. So they build a story from the Dexis. Now let's do an exam task. I want you to spend a full 30 seconds reading these 7 letters. Now here you notice that these 7 sentences have a common context, and if you were trying to create a lexical field and you're looking at frequency, you'd find that a couple of words spring out. Money, yeah, afford, cost, yeah? So we know just from looking at the context what the article's going to be about, because we already have a clear lexical field that's being produced just by this, yeah? So I often get the students to tell me what they're going to read before they've read it, just looking at the sentences. What's it going to be about? It's about money. Is it about making money? Is it about losing money? Or is it about saving money? Oh, it's about saving money, sir. We don't say sir anymore. It's about saving money. You stupid person. Okay, so we've had a look at these 7 sentences, and then I'll say, right, okay, very, very quickly, looking at the co-text, the sentence before and the sentence after the gaps, can you decide which sentences will fit into number 1, 2, and 3? And I'm going to give you 30 seconds as well. So you've not got enough time to read the whole thing. Quick. Money worries to a group of friends, came up with an unusual way to save money. Next one. They imagined I'd be living like a hermit, never going out and borrowing from them. And then the next one, she filled her freezer with loaves of bread and cheap items. She also picked fruit from bushes and took free samples. So that's the co-text, yeah? It's not the whole text, it's the co-text. What have we got for the answer to number 1? Have you got an answer? What have we got for the answer to number 2? Have you got an answer? What have you got for the answer to number 3? Have you got an answer? Hopefully you have, because we're moving on. Okay, we got 4, 5, and 6. And again, have a look at the co-text. I went to public lectures, buffet afterwards. I went to the library's 100th birthday where they had a buffet. I was the queen of the buffet. I would drag friends out to art openings and book launches. Okay, number 5. Any form of public transport was beyond. I did a lot of cycling. This increased because I had to make another saving. I had to cycle more because I had to. So I would simply cycle to friends' houses if I wanted to speak to them and leave a note. Okay, that's number 5. Number 6. Kath successfully completed the challenge she had set for herself. Another advantage was that she met and fell in love. Okay, there you go. Now, if you can train the students not to get distracted by reading the whole article, because this is where they get confused and they lose time, but just spend more time on the answers and work with that first, and then really pressurize them with the other things, you can see very clearly that it's quite easy. So she was worried about money, in particular about not being able to afford a good present. And again, being a hermit, they imagined I was going to be like a hermit. It wasn't like that at all. And of course, you know, she admits she ate a lot of soup. Yes. And then, so it's quite easy to work it out. Don't spend time reading the whole article. Spend time reading the co-text. The co-text is where the answers are. Better move on to use of English. Again, it's the same thing with the multiple choice. The multiple choice will look at collocations and dependent prepositions. Yeah, it'll look at phrasal verbs and those sorts of things. The students do not have to understand the cohesive argument that's being produced by the text. There's no point wasting their time with this. So what I get them to do is I get them to look very carefully at the co-text, the words before and afterwards. I actually get them to write these words down in a notebook. I say, right, we're going to write the words down in a notebook, see if you've written the similar words down. The less words you can write, the better, but it has to be enough for you to answer the questions. So, again, they might have something like this, where the bottom is what they've written down. Yeah? So these are the co-text from the exam structure. Now, if you have a look at the co-text, and if you have a look at the multiple choice options, can you very quickly try and answer the questions? Have you got enough information to answer the questions? Let's have a look. Important to, in a way, to, and of course, we've got this first one, let's have a look, is number 2. That's what's confusing you. Yeah, so obviously number 1 is interested in. So we're looking at number 2. Important to appear, to try, to act, to stay. Well, the important word is way, yeah? And the collocation is act. You act in different ways. And number 2, which is actually number 3, sorry, become, we've got prepared, active, careful, keen is the only one. So you don't need the whole text to answer the question, because it's just testing lexical grammar. So just get them to concentrate on the co-text. Let's do it with number 4, which is actually number 5, my fault. It's 4, it's 4, we've got that. So again, we've got at, rules, you follow rules, yeah. So don't waste their time trying to figure out what the text actually says. Spend the time on the co-text. Have a look at the next one, which is the open close. What's the origin of the close? Where did the close exercise, the gaps, come from? How many years? It's in the 50s. 1950s. Actually America, something we can thank America for, because when they were talking about high school dissertations, they did a readability test. And what they did was remove every 7th word from the dissertation and then give it to someone else to read. And if the reader could understand the dissertation with every 7th word missing, it passed the readability test. It was well written. And of course, removing words is what we've been doing ever since, but not every 7th word. What type of words are removed? Are they grammatical words or are they content words? Are they structural words or are they lexical words? They're structural words, of course, because lexical words have too many varieties unless it's a very fixed expression. So again, one of the things I do here is I say, right, okay, if you were going to make your own gap fill, which word would you remove from this paragraph to create an exercise? Can you have a quick read? Again, you might say, well, eyes, but there are other things you can wash, and it's a lexical word, so you probably wouldn't. There would be better, wouldn't they? So basically what I do is I say, right, okay, you've got an example, and this is the B2, the old FCE exam. So you have the example, which is in the first paragraph, which is 0, and then you have 8 other words that are removed. Can you predict which words the examiners removed? And again, okay, I had to spend a little bit of time typing out the text, but it was time well spent because I'm getting the students to focus on what's being tested. And what's focused on what's being tested are the words that I can't change, the words that are very fixed. And there's more than 9. Yeah, there's a lot more than 9, so they don't have to come up with exactly the same words, but they have to justify why they've chosen those words. It might be articles, Yeah? In my department. And then they're always very interested in opening their books to see whether they were correct or not, whether they've made the right assumptions. You know? So I think this pre-checking and getting them to consider what's being tested is quite useful. Again, word formation is another area. Affixation is something that allows flexibility. I think, I can't remember his name, is it? Somebody said if you learn these 14 words, you can learn 14,000 words if you understand what the affixes mean. Yeah? I can't remember who did it, but you can Google it and find out. It begins with N. Again, I do word races. So let's have a look at the first word, compete. I'll say, right, in pairs, how many other words can you form from the word compete? Yeah, compete, competitor, competition, competitive, competitively, non-competitively, etc., etc. And they write down the words. I then might put up on the board a suffixes grid. Yeah, so I'll put some suffixes down there and I'll say, right, okay, we've been talking about education or travel or whatever it is. I want you to work in pairs. One student is going to talk about the topic. The other student has got the grid in front of them. Every time they use a word with the suffix, they get a point. So maybe if I say, well, a capable teacher can't be careless, they have to be persistent, especially with the other person is listening and ticking off. And we have a race in terms of suffixes, so they're looking at that. Again, with these word races, it's amazing that they never tend to think of plural or singular or verb suffixes because you can make so many words from one. So just doing a simple board race, especially with early finishers, yeah, just to test their vocab knowledge can be quite useful. Now my favourite, sentence transformations. Don't your students just love sentence transformations? Half of the problem is that what we're really testing are reciprocal pairs, aren't we? So, you know, borrow, lend, yeah? Let's talk about can and able to and those sorts of things. There are so many distractors in these sentences that the first thing I ask students to do is to remove the words that are unnecessary. Remove the words that are repeated in the original sentence and the second sentence and see what you have left. And when they tend to do that, they find that there's a lot less to confuse them. So they've got, okay, can't be easy, and I have to have an expression that means the same with the word must. Okay, so we're changing again from negative to positive, so we're changing the word easy. And again, couldn't, again negative, and we have the word able. Is probably not, and we have the word might. You see how there's a lot less distraction. And a lot less distraction gets the students to focus on what's actually being tested. So again, it makes it easier for them. But I still think they get distracted by the context. So sometimes I'll give them something that they might find a little challenging. I mean, does your poodle need grouping? Have you grouped your poodle recently? And I think you know when you look at some of these old books, great books about learning vocabulary, like Discover English with David Noonan when he was talking about nobbits. So I got a nobbit. You got a nobbit? I got a nobbit in my pocket. I've got a chocolate knobbit in my pocket in case I get up, and of course they can work out from the context. So we have these sentences. And I said, right, you don't really understand these sentences, do you? So I'm going to help you. On one side, I've got sentences. The sentences you just seen. On the other side, I've got sentences that mean similar things. The trouble is, because you're such good students, and I've still got not much time, I'm going to get you to spend time. No, I'm not, because I haven't got time. There we go. So when they've matched the letters with the numbers, I ask them to translate the letters. Can you see? So if we just do the first one. We had only just hooved our twigs when they kicked rubing flibs. How would we translate that? Hardly had we taken our seats when they started showing trailers. We had only just taken our seats when they started showing trailers, yeah? So again, only just, hardly had. Yeah, these are reciprocal pairs. So getting the students to decode without context can be really useful. My goodness, 10 minutes left, you haven't put it up. 11 minutes left. No, I've got 12 minutes left, so good. All right, listening. Listening can be objective or productive. Let's have a look at this wonderful thing. What's the biggest problem with the short dialogues? Short dialogues, well, they're dialogues, so there are two speakers. And generally, even in these gender fluid times, one of the speakers is obviously sounds male and the other speaker sounds female, yeah? Just so that the students can look at the rubric and say, you'll hear two friends talking, what do they agree about? Okay. Number two, you will have two friends talking, how does the girl feel? Well, we're not interested in the boy. Yeah? Number three, you'll hear two, which opinion do they share? Number four, a grandfather, granddaughter, there's your male, female. How does a grandfather, how does he? So you don't listen to this. Half the time, the students don't read the question. I always get the students to read the question and write down who they're going to listen to, one or both. And of course, that short period of time can really help them. So when they have, and I think it's about 5 seconds before each bit, read the question, underline who you're going to listen to. That'll help you. When you move on to this exercise where you have multiple speakers, and they have to choose which speaker is talking about which, generally there's a connected theme, isn't there? Holidays, restaurants, yeah? All of the speakers are going to talk about holidays, all of the speakers are going to talk about restaurants. Thank you very much. So we're not interested in vocabulary related to holidays or restaurants, yeah? So don't get confused by the lexical field. The answer is in the functional language. I'll show you what I mean. Here's a typical, 5 speakers. The topic, what's the topic? Do you think it's not holidays? It's not, it's crime, isn't it? Yeah, we've got police, victims of crime, preventing crime. Yeah, it's crime. So here I have, where is it? Here I have a speaker, and I have made sure I've removed every word connected to crime. And all I'm left with are the functional exponents that the speaker's using. Now, if you look at the functional exponents, I'm not really worried about it. I think we can get this all out of proportion. I do think we spend too much time thinking about it. I have more important things to think about. Obviously, if we had to choose one of those letters, it's very clear that the letter is the last one. F. Yeah? It's not really a serious problem. Can't be any of the others. So getting the students to try and listen to the functional rather than the lexical can be really useful for this. Okay, gap fills. How many times do they normally hear a gap fill text? Twice! And what mistake do they make the first time they hear the gap fill text? They try and answer the question. As soon as they start answering the question, they lose track of the text and they're screwed. So I make sure that they turn their pens and pencils the wrong way round. So I get them to, the first time they listen, they have not this, but they have this. And when they're listening, they have to bang the table. That way, the better students bang the table when they hear the answer. The weaker students hear the better students banging the table. Oh, what did I miss? And they know next time. So it also gives me an idea as a teacher what's difficult and what's not for the students. So if they all bang, that's the easy one. If they don't bang, that's where we need to work a little bit. Speaking. Right. Personal information, describing, discussion, negotiation. You know the first part of the speaking test. I'm going to ask you a question. Where do you live? I live in Brno. Or Brno. It's not good enough. I have to give more information. Yeah? And extended answers are not easy in an artificial monolingual environment. Especially with teenagers who are very self-conscious about speaking at all, even in their own language, in front of other people. So I always start the semester by getting the students to talk about two things. So can you talk about living in the city or living in the country? Well, living in the city is better than living in the country because Or can you talk about winter holidays or summer holidays? Well, I like winter holidays because I like teaching kids or teaching adults, yeah? So I always consciously give them two things to talk about. All through September, October, they have two things to talk about. November comes, and I suddenly say, talk about families. Oh, it's only one thing. So is he talking big families, small families, extended families, nuclear families? They consciously create two, which gives them more things to talk about. Or talk about health. Ooh, public health, private health. So if you get them into the routine of constantly talking about two, and then you consciously get them to talk about one, they create two and they give better examples. When they have to compare pictures, I say before you compare pictures, before you can speak for a minute about something, you have to speak for a minute about nothing. So can you speak for a minute about this? There's nothing there. I said, yes, in the center we can see nothing. To the left of that, there's a little bit more nothing. Below that, there's some more nothing. And then just underneath that, to the right of that, there's a little bit more nothing. When they can speak for a minute about nothing, the functional bit, I get them to say, right, let's make it easier. What's the difference between A and B? Well, whereas A has a lot of nothing, B has, if you look closely, slightly less nothing than A, because A is and then once they feel confident about speaking about nothing, speaking about something is easy. When it comes to the collaborative task, I put on little pieces of paper, or the students put little pieces of paper down on scraps of paper in front of them. So they all make these, they put each phrase on a piece of paper, and then I get them to talk about something collaboratively, but it's not collaborative because they're competitive and it's artificial. But every time they use one of these phrases, they pick it up. And then after 3 minutes, we see who has the most. So they make it competitive, and I'm forcing them to use interactive language. Again, with writing tasks, we have open-ended tasks and we have input-based tasks. They're both graded the same. Obviously, with input-based tasks, they have to use the input. Yeah? So they have to talk about possessions, personal relationships, etc. There are model answers, and we do know that students benefit from a genre approach looking at the model answers in the back of the book. But we also know that students really benefit from looking at peer writing. If they look at what a student, they might not see their own mistakes, but they can certainly see their classmates. So what I tend to do is I'll give them the ideas. So this is an open-ended question, but I've given them a skeleton text. And I say, I want you to use this. Your article has to have this pattern. Yeah, it has to have this flow. And obviously, we've explained to the students that if you write within your capabilities, this is a set of sentences that are grammatically correct that would not pass a B2 level examination because it's not enough range, yeah? Not enough words as well. So all the students write the same article with the same opinions, but then we can compare, then we can look at who's best and who's not. And we're not looking at the creative arguments here, we're looking at the structural arguments, and this is really useful for peer correction. 2 minutes left, yeah? Fast writing, again, students tend to avoid certain words like prepositions, articles, those sorts of things, relative pronouns. So make sure that you write them on the board, make sure you've got a topic. You say, right, what's the topic? Let's say it's conferences, so you're going to talk about conferences. Before you talk about conferences, talk together. Now it's a contest. Every time you use one of these words correctly, you get a point. Anytime you use one of these words incorrectly, you'll lose a point. Should you choose not to use any of these words, your score will be 0. And you get them to discuss first, and then they fast write. And it's amazing how much nonsense students can write in about 2 minutes or 3 minutes. They write a paragraph, and then you get them to check. And it can be quite useful to get them to look at these things. I'm going to finish by saying it's important that students are being monitored in the process, and it's really important that you make sure the students autonomously are keeping a record of the task types they've done. If they're using a course book, the amount of task types and exam practice is distributed evenly through the book. So maybe they've only done the matching reading text in Unit 1, and it's 3 months ago, so they need extra practice at this type of text. So they should keep a record of when they do texts. They should use vocabulary databases. There are lots of free ones like Anki Online. It's really important that throughout the semester there are some times when you use time performance. You have exam conditions. Reading is an example of why students struggle, because they only read one text in their own time and they think reading's easy. When they have an exam to do and they've only got a limited amount of time and 3 texts to read, it's a lot harder. So having an online learning platform can be really useful. Encourages learner autonomy. I think it's really important that you help review, and it's easy to do if you use something like My Grammar Lab. The final thing I'd like you to look at is this. Refined practice. Don't just practice for the sake of it. Know what you're practicing, know why you're practicing. Less is more. Yeah, don't do it. Don't do page 17 just because you finished page 16. Yeah, have a reason for it. Again, think about timings. Some exercises need to be time pressured because the students will have time pressure in the exam. Think about conditions. If they're sitting next to each other, it's not exam conditions. Sometimes, occasionally in exam classes, set out the class and exam conditions. Think about student learning outcomes. Explain to them that it's not the answers that they're looking for, it's the strategies. And this is what they're going to learn today, which is why you might not complete the whole text. Highlight weaknesses. You're really bad at this, and you're really bad at that. So you need to have this type of homework, and you need to have that type of homework. Not the same homework for everyone. Again, remember, Improving your English is a byproduct. Passing the exam is what the students are interested in. So strategies in that final semester, that's what they want to know. How to pass the exam. And finally, make sure that your students are not turned off to the idea of exam success. They normally aren't, but sometimes if you say, right, we're going to do this is Unit 7, how's this going to help? Well, this is going to help you with this part of the exam. Thanks very much for your time. Enjoy the rest of the conference.